Hare Krishna, everyone.
Amen.
Very happy to be here with you today. Is it possible to get Bhagavad Gita? Is it Gita in the house?
It's in the temple.
It's in the temple. Okay, good. All right, so I had an idea of what to discuss, but we can be very open. If you perhaps have some idea of something you want to discuss, or you have some questions. Do you have some questions? Would you like to do questions and answers, or would you like me to speak something? Questions? Okay, maybe I'll speak for a little while, and then I'll open it out, and you can see what questions you have. Okay, so let's be spontaneous today. Let's see what Krishna wants to. Prabhu, give us a number between 1 and 18.
16.
16. Okay, heavy chapter. Very good.
Nature enjoyer.
And can you give me a number between 1 and 24?
20.
20, okay, so today we're reading from chapter number 16, entitled The Demoniac, the Divine and the Demoniac. And today we're reading from text number 20. Okay. Let's see. So this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna, and Krishna is talking about the divine and the demoniac. It's said that in previous ages, divine and demoniac were in different planets. But then, as it came to Treta Yuga, divine and demoniac were on the same planet, but in different families. Then once it came to Dwapara Yuga, it said that divine and demoniac were in the same family, but in different individuals. But by the time we get to Kali Yuga, then divine and demoniac is not just on the same planet, it's not just in the same family, it's not just in the... it's in the same? It's in the same person. So sometimes we have like, you know, in the cartoon sometimes there's like a devil here, and then an angel here, and then the confused person inside. So we each have a lower nature and we have a higher nature. Sometimes when we think of demons, we think of, you know, like a one-eyed, 6 hands, you know, like... But actually, demon... Do you know what is the definition of an asura? In Sanskrit, the definition of an asura, ashushu ramate iti asura. Literally, anyone who likes to take pleasure in the senses is an asura. So then you begin to think, yeah, all these guys. So actually each one of us have some kind of demoniac, isn't it? Even sometimes when we watch our mind, we think, my God. Once I was on, like in airports you have those escalators that come down. So once I was on one of those escalators and the escalator was packed. And I was coming down on the escalator and in my mind the thought came, I wonder what would happen if I pushed the person in front of me. I was thinking like, my God, I'm supposed to be a nice person. So the mind can come up with anything because still we all have some demoniac tendency within us. So Krishna is teaching Arjuna what is demoniac tendency and what is divine tendency. And Krishna explains that as you practice devotional service more and more, then one measure that you're advancing is that the demoniac qualities should begin to decline and the divine qualities should begin to manifest. So now Krishna is speaking to Arjuna. You asked for it, this one. And Krishna is speaking to Arjuna and he's talking about someone who in their character has demoniac tendency. Asurim yonimapanna Buddha janmani janmani Mama prapyeva kaunteya Tato yadamam gatim. So Krishna says to Arjuna, attaining repeated birth amongst the species of demoniac life, O son of Kunti, such persons can never approach me. Gradually they sink down to the most abominable type of existence. Purport. It is known that God is all merciful, but here we find that God is never merciful to the demoniac. It is clearly stated that the demoniac people, life after life, are put into the wombs of similar demons and, not achieving the mercy of the Supreme Lord, they go down and down, so that at last they achieve bodies like those of cats, dogs, and hogs. It is clearly stated that such demons have practically no chance of receiving the mercy of God at any stage of later life. In the Vedas, it is also stated that such persons gradually sink, become dogs and hogs. It may be then argued in this connection that God should not be advertised as all-merciful if he is not merciful to such demons. In answer to this question in the Vedanta Sutra, we find that the Supreme Lord has no hatred for anyone. The placing of the asuras, the demons, in the lowest status of life is simply another feature of his mercy. Sometimes the asuras are killed by the Supreme Lord, but this killing is also good for them. For in Vedic literature we find that anyone who is killed by the Supreme Lord becomes liberated. There are instances in history of many asuras, Ravana, Kamsa, Hiranyakashipu, to whom the Lord appeared in various incarnations just to kill them. Therefore God's mercy is shown to the asuras if they're fortunate enough to be killed by him. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
A nice and light purple for a sunny Saturday afternoon in San Diego. Om Jnana Timiran Visya Jana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nidhamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Veshakarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. So it's mentioned that the universe, there are 14 levels in this universe. You can think of it as a house which has 7 stories in the basement and 7 stories high. So as Krishna explains that according to one's karma, according to one's activity in this life, then what will happen is one will take their next life in one of these planetary systems. The higher planets are like heavens, and there is great enjoyment. There life goes on for a long time. There is practically no distress, there's practically no difficulty. And then there are the lower planets. In the lower planets, there are 2 types of lower planets. One is known as the subterranean heavens. So subterranean heavens means it's like a heavenly planet, but it's inhabited with demoniac individuals. And then lower than that, is said that there are hellish planets. So if you want, I'm just giving you the trailer. If you want the full movie, then you can read the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Certificate 18. So it's mentioned by Krishna here that if one cultivates a mentality which is harmful to others, if one cultivates a mentality which is harmful to themselves, then what Krishna does is he sends that soul in the next life to go down to the lower planetary systems. So you can think of it like a jail. Why does the government create a jail? Is it because it wants to encourage people to be criminal? No, it's the other way around. That because people have a criminal tendency, then the government has to create a prison. And the idea of the prison is that the prisoner suffers there so that they eventually realize that this is not the right way to live, this is not the right mentality to have. And by that period of life in the prison, they eventually get released. So therefore it's explained that the earthly planets that we're on are actually the best place to be. Because in the heavenly planets there's too much enjoyment. It's just too nice. Kind of like San Diego. This is kind of like a heavenly place. So, you guys also need to come and spend some time in London. You need to see some rain, you need to see some misery, some gloominess. Because when you're in the heavenly planets, it all looks so nice that you just think like there's no urgency. And the hellish planets is just so distressing that there's no space and headspace to even think about anything more. So if we want to get out of the material world, then it's said that the human form in the earthly planets is the best. It's like if you want to get out of this house, then you can't get out of the house in the basements, right? You can't really get out of the house on the higher floors unless you want to kill yourself. Really speaking, the way you get out of this house is by being on the ground floor. But in America, you call it the first floor. But you get what I mean. This floor. However, what Krishna does is he puts us through different experiences which are required. And therefore, what Krishna will sometimes do is he subjects us to a life in which there is some pain, a life in which there is some struggle, a life in which one is almost having some shocking experiences. And what that does is that helps us to evolve our consciousness. And then what happens is we come to the human form of life. And in the human form of life, we have then the opportunity to come out of this situation. So this is a very, very powerful philosophy. In many, many traditions around the world, they try to teach the world that there is an eternal heaven and there is an eternal hell. But if you think about an eternal hell, that doesn't really make much sense. Because why would an all-compassionate, an all-knowing, an all-omniscient, and an all-powerful God subject us to suffering and suffering and suffering for eternity without anything good coming from it? Therefore, although here in the verse Krishna says that I cast them again and again, life after life, into abominable species of life, into the demoniac situations, there's no mention of eternity. Krishna will always give us an opportunity to come out of these situations. Therefore, where you are in your life doesn't determine who you are. Sometimes we may even feel that currently in our life at present, we are going through very, very difficult situations. Sometimes when we think of hell and when we think of heaven, we can think of it as other planets. But sometimes we can even think of hell and heaven as present here on this planet. Once someone asked Srila Prabhupada in London, does Krishna speak Bhagavad Gita in the hellish planets? Prabhupada looked at the person and said, London is hell. Sometimes we think the hellish planets are somewhere else. But in this world, there are also hellish conditions. This world is not a nice place. Did you know that if you have food in your fridge, if you have shelter over a roof over your head, and if you have clothes on your back, then you are in the 25% most rich people in this world. Did you know that if you can read English, or if you can read any language for that matter, you have received an opportunity of education that 50% of people in this world don't receive? Did you know that if you have money in your bank account, and if you have a wallet with some spare change in it, you are in the top 8% of rich people in this world? Did you know that if you have never experienced war and never experienced famine, starvation, then you are luckier than 500 million people who are experiencing that right now as we speak? So this world is also having its fair share of heaven and also hellish conditions. But Krishna consciousness is the process by which we can escape these conditions. What Krishna is doing by all the events, experiences, and emotions that we go through is Krishna is trying to rewire and re-engineer our consciousness. Srila Prabhupada explains that we have two major problems in our life, two psychic tendencies which are keeping us in the material world. Anyone know what those two are? Two psychologies which keep us in this world. Desire, close. Yeah.
Anger.
Anger, yeah. This comes later on. Anger comes, okay.
Karma.
Karma, yes, that also comes later on. Srila Prabhupada explains that we have two tendencies. One is to be the enjoyer, and the other one is to be the controller. These tendencies are deep within our consciousness, and these are the tendencies which are actually keeping us in this world. And so everything that we go through in life is meant to help us learn, I'm not the controller, and is meant to help us learn, I'm not meant to try to enjoy or exploit. That doesn't mean I'm not meant to be happy. Everyone is meant to be happy, but we don't become happy by enjoying or exploiting resource or other people. So now if you think about anything in your life that you're going through right now, I can tell you why you're going through it. Because the answer is universal. Anything that we're going through right now, maybe you say, I'm going through a relationship challenge, I'm going through a health challenge, I'm going through a career crisis, I'm going through a very difficult, time with my mind, whatever it may be, it's all meant to teach us, the bottom line is that we're not the controller and we're not the enjoyer. The moment we realize I'm an instrument of Krishna, and the moment we realize that I am meant to serve, then as we become an instrument of service, then we qualify ourselves to come out of this world. And so the world is kind of ingeniously created in such a way to give us a variety of experiences so that we can ultimately elevate our consciousness in this way. So, the Bhagavad Gita is very, very powerful because the Bhagavad Gita is the handbook, the map, the kind of the instruction manual which is helping us to understand why the world is the way it is and how we can come out of this world. And so this is the purpose of why Srila Prabhupada, the great teachers, gave us these books. Because without these books we can't make sense of the environment around us, and we can't make sense of why we're going through what we're going through. So therefore it's mentioned right at the beginning of the Gita, Krishna, Srila Prabhupada mentions the Gita Mahatmya at the end of the introduction, and therefore there he mentions the very beautiful verse, Maline Moshanam Punsham Jalashnanam Dine Dine Gita Shakrit Bhashishhnanam Samsara Malanashanam. There Srila Prabhupada quotes Lord Shiva, who says that just as every day we take a bath with water to cleanse this physical body, then every day we should take a bath in the words of the Bhagavad Gita, because that will help us to find clarity. Otherwise, we live in a world which is very confusing and very distressing. But the Bhagavad Gita won't necessarily take away all of those challenges, but what it will do is give us a lens, a vision, a darshan, through which we're able to understand all of this, why it's happening, and how it's ultimately for my best. Put your hands up if you feel there's not one thing you'd like to change in your life. Actually, when we read the Gita and we elevate our consciousness, we realize it's perfect. Where I am, who I'm surrounded by, the opportunities I have, the challenges and obstacles that are there in my life, it's all actually perfect. Because if Krishna is my best friend, and Krishna is simultaneously the controller of everything, so the Bhagavad Gita really helps us to come to terms with all of this. And here in this verse today, Krishna is reminding us that if we continue on with the exploitative mentality, then Krishna will have to give us some experiences in our life to take us out of that mentality. And that is another exhibition of His kindness and His grace. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, so let me just finish here and let me see whether you may have any questions on this or comments, or if there's something more on this that's not clear that you would like to ask about. Hare Krishna. Nice to see you. Okay.
So Maharaj, you mentioned that Srila Prabhupada's given us these books so we can sort out, deal with the material world. But I find it amazing that within our society, we're all reading the same books, but we don't all come to the same conclusion. So, especially during election years like we have in the States, I find it remarkable that some devotees that are reading the same books will argue the Democratic view versus the Republican view, or they may argue veganism versus vegetarianism very, very passionately, So how is that we're reading the same books but we come to different conclusions?
Thank you so much for a nice question. So we're reading the same books. There's a saying like that, right? You read the Bible and so do I. No, I read the Bible day and night. You read black, I read white, or something like that. So how is it that we're all reading the same book, but we come to slightly different understandings or majorly different understandings? There's different ways. I would say there's 3 ways to see that. The first thing is that we're all reading the same books, but we're all reading it with a different consciousness. And therefore, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And therefore, according to the level of one's consciousness, one will be able to draw something from the scripture. You even find this, that as one advances more and more, they can read the same book and they can draw more and more information out because their consciousness is now more elevated. Therefore, sometimes we say these books are like a zip file. And the more that you're competent, you can actually unzip more and more. So the first reason why we come is because we have different levels of consciousness. The second reason is because the same thing can actually be seen from many, many different angles of vision. And sometimes it may even seem like 2 individuals seem to say opposite things, but they're both true. Like for example, if I ask you, who comes first, the father or the son? It's not a trick question.
Father.
The father. It is a trick question. Father. Father obviously comes before the son. Wrong. Because until the son is born, he's not a father. So first the son has to be born, and then he becomes a father. So the son comes before the father. Or I could say the son and the father are born simultaneously. So if he says the father is born before the son, Prabhu says the son is born before the father, and I say no, the son and the father are born at the same time, then someone may say we have 3 different opinions and we don't agree. But actually we're looking at the same truth from different angles of vision. Does that make sense? So that's sometimes another reason why we may read the books and have different opinions, because the same truth can be seen from different angles of vision. And the third reason why we may have different opinions is because someone's just got it wrong. Because Shastra has to be understood through Guru and Sadhu. And therefore, if one doesn't understand Shastra through Guru and Sadhu, then they may read the Shastra, but they may misunderstand the Shastra. So those are like, I guess, 3 broad levels. Like there's a mundane level of why we see differently because someone's just misinterpreted. There's a kind of higher dimensional reason because we're drawing different things according to our consciousness. And there's a higher dimensional thing that the absolute truth is also multifaceted. And so it can present itself to different people in different ways. That's why you find even sometimes the acharyas, they commentate on the same thing and give slightly different visions of realization.
Like the Putana Lila?
Yeah, like why did Krishna close his eyes when Putana came? And there are a variety of reasons that different acharyas give. And in one sense we can say all of them are true. Thank you.
At the beginning you mentioned there are 500 million people that are really suffering, or what was the category definition of those?
There's a statistic, if you've never been wrongly imprisoned, if you've never been caught in a kind of war, and if you've never experienced starvation, then there are 500 million people who are going through that right now.
Of the population that is suffering, that are starving, that category, I'm not sure which category that was. How easy is it to preach from the Bhagavad Gita?
To them?
Are they able to listen and hear it if they're anamaya consciousness?
So when we are in a highly distressful situation, are individuals able to hear the teachings? We can say yes and no. Some do, right? Like I once had a godbrother, I have a godbrother who once used to be in the US Army, and so he was in the Gulf War. So he would often tell me of like conversations that he would have with people who were in the middle of these kind of warfare situations. And he was also preaching Bhagavad Gita to them. And he said he found many, many receptive people, and sometimes there is that sense that when you really experience the naked form of material nature, then it awakens. But sometimes, as you mentioned, it can be so acute, the suffering, that it's so difficult that someone is in that moment not able to hear any philosophy. But what we understand is that even in that situation, an impression is made within their consciousness, which later on, once things maybe calm down, that impression will stick with them, and then the next time they hear philosophy, it will drive home. But yes, there's a sense in which when someone is going through acute suffering, it's very difficult. I'll tell you a story. Once I was driving, and then one of the devotees from the temple, he called me and he said, I want you to go to a family's home. There's been a bereavement there. Someone's passed away. So I stopped the car, I turned around, and I started going towards that house. And just before I reached the house, he called me again. And he said, I'm just going to tell you what kind of situation you're going into now. So I stopped the car in front of the house. So he began explaining to me, he said, this family that you're going to see now, they had 2 daughters. And what happened is 1 year ago, one of the daughters was in the town. Anyway, she got attacked and she was killed. That happened last year. And he said, what happened just yesterday is the other daughter, on the anniversary of the other one who passed away, on the anniversary of her passing away, this daughter went to the top of a car park and jumped. So he said, this is the house you're going into now. So in my mind I was thinking, what do you say? What do you say in that situation? So I walked up to the house and I was in my mind thinking, what do you say to this? And I went to knock the door, and as I knocked the door opened. And the mother was there. And with tears in her eyes, she just looked at me and she said, why has Krishna done this to me? And in that moment, there was no philosophy. There's nothing you can say. Because it's too painful. It's just way too painful. And so we just went inside and we just tried to offer comforting words. And we just tried to reassure her that, yes, life will never be the same. But there's still beauty in life that you have to live for, and you have to carry on. And then, down the line, then some months later, we kept on visiting and we came back, and then some more philosophy, some more, try to get some understanding. So yes, emotions are very real, and sometimes emotions block us from philosophically being able to understand things. So yes, emotions are very real, and sometimes emotions block us from philosophically being able to understand things. So yes, emotions are very real, and sometimes emotions block us from philosophically being able to understand things. So yes, emotions are very real, and sometimes emotions block us from philosophically being able to understand things. Therefore, as we share Krishna consciousness, it requires a lot of compassion, a lot of kindness, a lot of humanity. It's not just about giving philosophy, but it's really about understanding what people are going through.
It reminds me of my godbrother Guru Garanga, whose parents, or his father, was a Holocaust survivor. And he visited Guru Garanga when he was in France. And at that time, he mentioned his name, Bhagavan was the temple president at that time. And his father said, "What about the Holocaust? I'm a Holocaust survivor. How do you explain that? How does God allow that?" He experienced it.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, it's your karma." Just kind of blew it off, and it left him with a very bad taste. Father of a devotee. How do you approach that in a different way?
You know, oftentimes when we talk about karma, we always talk about it as something to judge people for their past. But what we can also say is karma, use it as an empowering concept to move forward. And that's why in these situations, my message is always that life will never be the same. You've gone through that situation, but life can still be beautiful. Talk about the future. Yes, how do we explain the suffering of this world? Why do bad things happen to good people has been a topic that has baffled even religious people for generations. In fact, there's a whole area of philosophy which is just dealing with this problem called Theodicy. If there's a God who's all compassionate, who's all knowing, and who's all powerful, then how can there be such acute suffering in the world? We tell people the depth of God's love can be understood if you understand the length and the breadth of our existence. The depth of God's love can be understood when you understand the length. The length of our existence means this life is one of many, it's a chapter of many. And the breadth of our existence means that we're not simply a soul, we're not simply a physical body or a mind, but we're a spirit soul. And so whenever Krishna is dealing with us, according to karma, our physical and subtle body may go through different trauma, but the soul is ultimately untouched. So when we understand this breadth of our existence and the length of our existence, then even when we go through painful situations or others, we can still understand the depth of God's love. That even in that pain, God has a greater plan and a greater journey that He's taking the soul on. And so this answer may not philosophically satisfy others in their pain, but once things settle, then maybe they'll be able to digest it.
Would you express some sympathy in some way that they have gone through that horrific experience?
Of course. Just because we believe that everything happens, just because we understand that everything is going on under a higher law, it doesn't diminish the compassion and sympathy we feel for others. Because ultimately nobody should have to go through that. Ultimately nobody should have to go through that. Because nobody should be under the laws of karma. Nobody should have to go through the pain of this dukkhalaya nishashvata. And therefore, pada dukkha dukkhi, devotee sees another suffering as their own.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming. The question is, in Swarga Loka, which is higher than Bhumi Loka, Prithvi Loka, they, as you mentioned, they have a lot of, they live longer and they have more sense enjoyment. Are there any devotion, or if there is, how much, what is the percentage? Or if you can just talk about it a little bit, we would be speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, generally those who go to the heavenly planets go there with an agenda. Those who in this world are performing activities which accumulate punya, then they go to the heavens. So therefore the heavenly planets are a place of enjoyment. Of course there is the opportunity of spirituality everywhere. It's explained just as we have the Bhagavatam here, there are Bhagavatams on the heavenly planets which are much more vast. So it's not that there's an absence of knowledge, or there's an absence of spiritual opportunity. But it's just that those who go there go with an agenda, and it's usually something which diverts them. Therefore Krishna says, Kshine punya martya lokam vishanti, that when that punya runs out, and when it's exhausted, then they come back to this world. Because as I mentioned, this world has the perfect balance of pleasure and pain in order to give us the impetus to come out. So I don't think we can say that there can not be any elevation from the heavenly planets higher. Anything is possible. But generally, the way the Bhagavad Gita explains it, and Srila Prabhupada explained it, is that generally what happens is they come back here, and then from here.
Thank you so much. I have heard one more question in question, that or I read that they want to come back to Purva because it's easier to perform bhakti because there's a mix of
Happiness.
dukkha and happiness and distress both because we go through that side. They also want to come back. This is a better place for bhakti, quickly dukkha is a better place.
Yes, yeah, because it's the most balanced place. Yes. Therefore, it's said that even demigods are queuing up to take birth here, because it's the ideal place, Bharat Bhumi.
Yeah, this in regards to Mataji's question and regarding we already explained regarding the positions of the planets in chapter 5. So where is the position of the earth in that garland? What Krishna has made, where the earth is situated, and
Where is the
question,
earth situated?
Yeah, in the garland of, he has made the universe and all planetary systems are there, where there is a pole star as well, the Dhruva Maharaj. So I want to know the second question.
Okay, let's just go with that
second-
one first.
Yeah.
Because
I
otherwise
have
I
three
forget.
questions in mind, and then I forget. And then second in regards to her is like, she asked, but I think there is one more step in that. Even, is it, I'm not sure, is it something like that even if after heaven dies, the moksha dwara only opens from the human birth? Like everyone has to come and then moksha dwara opens from there, is it? It's not, because you have spirituality elevation everywhere. In every other planet, Krishna is
Anything's
taking-
possible. You can also go from the heavenly planets, but it's generally not what happens.
Ah.
It's generally not what happens.
Are you sure, like from any planets?
Yes, but there's quotes, references for that. It's possible to get elevation from anywhere.
The
by Krishna's
elevation,
mercy.
but moksha dwara.
To
Opens.
come out of the material world, yeah, also possible.
Okay, because other planets, Krishna is manifested in every other planets in different forms. Elevations are there, knowledge is everywhere. They go to Brahmaloka and then from there the last.
Like say for example Dhruva Maharaj.
Yeah.
So Dhruva Maharaj, so the Bhagavatam tells us, Sthana Vilasi Tapasi Stitoham. He situated himself in penance because he wanted a kingdom greater than his forefathers. So then finally when Krishna appeared, then Dhruva said, I don't want it. I don't want it anymore. So Krishna said, no, you take it. The pole star is yours. You will rule it for 36,000 years. Dhruva said, but I want to come out. Krishna says, after those 36,000 years, you will go. So that means he didn't have to come back here. He went to the pole star, he ruled that planet, and then he came out.
Oh, okay. So other planets have an opportunity to open
But
the
generally,
mission.
as I
Yeah, I know
mentioned,
because of that.
yeah.
I know it's very hard to explain, but this is not hard here actually. Yeah, so that one question now, my earth where it is situated.
Okay, where's the earth situated? So the fifth canto, the Cosmology, explains that, as I mentioned, there are 14 planetary systems.
Yes.
So if you imagine the 14 is divided by one disk,
Yes.
this disk is known as Bhumandala.
Okay.
Okay, and on this disk there are concentric islands.
Okay.
So we are on the island of Jambudvip.
Yeah.
And suspended above Jambudvip
Uh-huh.
is Bhumandala.
Uh-huh.
And Bhumandala is what we understand to be the Earth planet where we're residing. And then Mount Meru is at the center of all of those islands going up. Sumeru.
So Sumeru is in the center.
It's in the so there's 9 concentric islands,
Yes.
and right in the center is Sumeru.
Okay. I understand now. So the second one is there. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I don't know what the time frames are.
4:50, 5 to 10.
Okay, sure.
Thank you, Maharaj. You asked
Yeah,
about
same 10 minutes of time, sir.
6 o'clock. 5:36.
You mentioned very nicely about controller and enjoy from Srila Prabhupada quoting, right? So my question is, yes, we as devotees understand that controllership, enjoyership mentality should not be there. But when we go out and whether we work or deal with other people, then they also have like a lot of controllership and enjoyership mentality. So how do we demarcate to what degree we should basically tolerate or allow them to do that thing which does not basically cross the line and basically exploit us in ways which they should not, right? So how should we deal that
So
situation?
we're trying to realize that we're not the controller. It's not that we realize we're not the controller by stopping like our duties in this world. Like now I'm supposed to learn I'm not the controller, therefore I should just let go of everything. No, that's not the point. The point is Krishna says, Karmanyeva dikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Do your duty, make your endeavor, but never think karta aham iti manyate. Never think you're the one actually ultimately bringing that activity to fruition. That's what it means to not be the controller. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because we have this mentality which keeps coming in ourselves that I'm the one who's doing this. Like there was a man who wanted to go to an interview. He had an interview. Anyway, he was getting later and later and he was going to miss the interview and he couldn't find a car parking space. So he started praying to God like, I need to find a parking space. I need to find a parking space. Anyway, he turned the corner. He went down the road. He was driving, praying like anything. He turned the corner. He found a parking space. He looked up at God and he said, don't worry, I found one. That's the thing. That Ishvara Bhav still keeps coming back in. So to be the controller, that controlling mentality means that I'm doing my duty and I'm understanding that Gaba Icha Balavan, the Prabhupada says. Your desire is the most strongest, the supreme. And whatever is happening only by your control. Does that make sense? So when you're at work or when you're dealing with things, you have to be responsible, you have to be dutiful, you have to put in your endeavor, and then you have to understand it's not. Like you can't control your kids. Right? I mean, it's a fact. Right? Even if you can now, just wait. So, but what that does that mean you just say like, I can't control my kids, now just let them run loose? I can't control them anywhere. I'm not the controller. No, you do your best. But inside your heart, you know, when all is said and done, they're a spirit soul. And it's between them and Krishna. And whatever they want to do. So, to not be the controller means we don't try to, we don't act in false ego. Does that help?
Yes.
How to maintain Vaishnava relationship? Because sometimes it can happen that you get close to people and you like the possibility. So, and what's your advice that keep Vaishnava relationship make us a very healthy?
Okay. So how do we, the question is, thank you so much. The question is, how do we maintain Vaishnava relationships? Because sometimes we form friendships, we come together, but then we see some negative qualities in others. And sometimes this kind of makes us grow further apart. So how do we? One time someone came to Srila Prabhupada and said, I just can't tolerate this devotee anymore. Prabhupada said, you should tolerate him just as I'm tolerating you. So the first thing is that we realize that I also have faults. Just as this person has faults, I also have faults. I have my weakness.
That was a part of the question I didn't ask. Like, they also start finding faults with us. Then how far or what's a good, what to say? Like, always keep Krishna in the center and be like in that consciousness, or you be friends. So, what is the guideline that it's still good, positive friendship, but then you're also
A good friend may find faults in you. But what they'll also do is give you the love and encouragement and confidence that you can come out of those faults. That's the difference between feedback and criticism. Feedback we want, and feedback we should give. But criticism is not good. When we criticize others, it means we find the fault and we have no intention or desire to actually help them to improve. Then why are you saying it? But feedback means, I see this, I'm saying it for your good, and I'm here to serve you. I'm not higher than you, but I'd love to be able to help you because I can see the potential in you. That kind of friendship we want. So in Vaishnava community, we should give each other feedback. But feedback means we should also give love, support, kindness, like that. And so, like this is the great advantage. We can't do it alone. If we think we'll do it alone, then therefore Narottam Das Thakur says, Tadira Charana Sevi, Bhakta Sanivas, Janame Jagame Hoy, Eyam Vilash. To serve the Vaishnavas, to always live with them, life after life. This is my only desire. Alright, maybe last one.
I have a question when we are facing a problem or when we are in some crisis situation, we might think, as you said in the mom's example, losing children is not at all someone could go through, even if however bad thing they did in their previous life or whatever it might be. So after knowing all this, how should we take it or react in such a situation? When it happens to us, even sometimes even if we get a small problem, even if we know everything like the scriptures or anything, all those don't come into our brain at that point of time.
So what do we do when we go through a very bad situation or difficult situation? How do we? So it's like this. This is how I explain it to people. That, say for example, you're going through this bad thing in your life. then I say the first thing is try to look at the good around the bad. What happens is in our life, one bad thing is happening and now we're just tunnel vision on this one thing. But what we don't see are all the other beautiful things that are still there. We're not saying the bad isn't there, but can you also see all the other good things? Sometimes when we also learn to see the good around the bad, then when we look at that bad, we think maybe it's not as bad as I think it is. So first thing is, when something bad happens, look for the good around the bad. Second thing is, when something bad happens, look for the good that comes from the bad. Can you rewind in your life and think of a bad time, a bad experience? And can you think of how it developed something good in you that wouldn't have been developed through any other kind of experience? Therefore, the second thing we try to do is look for the good that comes from the bad. And the third thing we can do is when something bad happens, we have to look up at Krishna and say, what is the good that you want me to develop in order to counteract this bad? Because when Krishna puts us through a situation, what Krishna is asking us to do is change something and upgrade something of our character. And so we're not sitting here saying that everything that happens is good. But what we are saying is that something good can come from everything that happens. And that means, number one, look for the good around the bad. Look for the good that comes from the bad, and look for the good that God wants you to develop in order to counteract the bad. And when we do that, then the bad doesn't look as bad as we initially thought.
One quick follow-up to this. It's been on our minds. When something happens, does a devotee always see it as Krishna's doing that, or is it my karma, it's my fate?
Yeah, so how do we know whether it's Krishna directly arranging it or whether it's karmic? In one sense, both are Krishna, because Maya Dhakshena Prakriti, Suyate Sacharacharam. Krishna says the material nature is working under my direction. So even if we say something is karmic, behind that karmic law is Krishna's sanction. So in one sense, it is Krishna anyway. But then, it is often said like this, that as soon as you become a devotee of Krishna and you endeavor to go back to Krishna, then Krishna is personally dispensing our karma in such a way that it will bring us closer to Him. So in another sense, we can say, for anyone who's on the devotional path, it's never just the laws of karma. Krishna is specifically looking at how to give that karmic reaction to the devotee in such a way that it will bring that devotee closer. All right, thank you so much.
Hare Krishna, we have some of Maharaj's books available, I believe at the back there. So we have Maharaj's written over 10 books. We've got 4 of them available here today. I'll quickly go through what they are, and then if anyone would like to come and purchase some, we accept card payments. So I'll be standing there and we can go through that. And we potentially have a few minutes where Maharaj can sign the books as well, if that's okay, Maharaj. So the 4 books that we have are Gita Life, where Maharaj very beautifully summarizes the whole Bhagavad Gita in acronym form. So each of the chapters has its own acronym, which cover the main themes of the Bhagavad Gita. We then have Gita Free. So Gita Free is like a more of a workbook for life. Okay, perfect, thank you. So that's Gita Life, that's the first one we're speaking of, and that one is $11. We then have Gita Free. Now I'm going through these two first because people often get confused between them. This one is less of a summary, but it's more of a workbook. So there are different exercises in this book, and it's very practical. It's got over 50 different experiments and meditations in there. And it's very good because Maharaj often speaks, and he's been speaking a lot on unity and this idea of character growth recently, and this is really good for the idea of character growth. So these two actually complement each other very well. We then have Tattva. So many of us had questions today. Tattva is based on Maharaj's blog. If you don't follow it, Maharaj has a blog, also called Tattva, which he posts on regularly online. Please follow it. It's great. It's free. You can follow it online. This book is quite insightful because it answers many of life's most challenging questions, and many of the questions that we often have. So Maharaj answers them really beautifully. And again, it's great for answering questions for potentially when you have people who are a bit newer to Krishna consciousness for asking us these questions. Sometimes we find it difficult knowing what to say, and Maharaj answers these really well. And last but definitely not least, we've got book Bhagavat. Maharaj summarizes the whole of Srimad Bhagavatam, all 12 cantos in his book. It's a bit of a study guide. Many of us maybe have tried reading Bhagavatam or read it, and I know for myself in particular, I found it very difficult with all of the different concepts as I was going through it. Maharaj very beautifully goes through and explains all the concepts. There's different diagrams, different analogies. He goes through what the story is. It's a really, really incredible book. You can use it as somewhat of a study guide as you go through Bhagavatam. So we have these 4 books available. This is $25. This is $14, $12.50, and $11. If we can all make sure we can pay in card, that would be ideal. We accept Apple Pay or contactless as well. And if you've got cash, maybe if we're able to work out amongst ourselves where you maybe give someone the cash and they pay by card instead, that would be really helpful. Just because it's difficult to carry so much cash as we're traveling so much. So that would be really, really great. I'll be standing at the back, I believe there's a table there. I think